Hi everyone, I'm Petrus and welcome to WorldView. WorldView is a podcast where we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. If you've watched some of our content so far and liked it, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and donating on Patreon. At the end of this video, we'll have a wonderful rendition of Come Glorious Colors Rise by Libertas Choir. Today, we're talking with Ingrid Jones. Ingrid is the founder of Mikateko Media. Mikateko Media is an award-winning communications agency that is behind publications such as in-flight magazines for Mango Airlines, FastJet, and Big Issue. She's also a straight-talking motivational speaker, and we're looking forward to learn more about her today. Ingrid, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Petrus, for the invitation. I'm excited to have this chat with you.
We're also very excited. I just want to first ask, as a precursor, I'm also aware you're involved with some other activities. Could you please elaborate on that?
And during lockdown, when people were starting to cook and making banana loaves, I was also on the internet, but I can't cook. And so a friend of mine, Ruby Marks, who at that stage was the ambassador to Sri Lanka, reposted a recipe that I made, a bobotie recipe. And then she said, because that particular recipe was posted in Taste magazine. And then she said, well, when will our recipes be, taken out by these glossy magazines? And then I said, well, why don't we do it as a joke? And then it wasn't a joke, because then I also was reminded of the fact that I work for a publishing house. And so during lockdown, we then brought out a magazine called Kusisto, which is now a quarterly, as if I didn't have enough to do. And over and above that, also a book published by Anneke Miller, uitgevers, called Lockdown Recipes Storytelling Book, and all recipes in the book are supplied by a Facebook group that started under lockdown. Yeah, so that keeps me busy.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, they didn't know you were busy enough with magazines already. They wanted to put you in another one. You're just quite that popular. We were recommended to talk to you by one of our previous interviewees, Dr. Gillian Orense, which was an amazing discussion of itself, in that he helped give some perspectives that he had as someone who grew up. I mean, he not the majority of his life was spent during the apartheid era, but he grew up in that era, and he explained of some of the remnants that remain. He also said that you have a special connection with it that we'll explain shortly. But is there some of the notable experiences that highlight your experience growing up in that time as well that you'd like to share?
Look, I had probably two seminal years. I'm much older than Gillian, so my life experience is quite longer than his. So I was smack bang in the 76 movement. I was in standard 7, which is now grade 9. And when it broke the whole thing down with Afrikaans, I was there. So I was away from my parents' home because there were no schools for Black/brown children where we came from. And we had to leave our homes to go and live in hostels in other towns. I went to high school in Worcester. I'm from Bonneville originally. So I'm an Afrikaans girl. And so I knew nothing else other than speaking Afrikaans. And so when this broke, it was a huge shock to my system that people are against this language that I so dearly love. And so I was 13 years old, and immediately we used a word called conscientization at the time. And we were, thrown in there, and we had to listen to political education by the older guys. Were at that stage in matric and in standard 9, or those last 2 years of high school. And some of the guys who went away to university came back to the school to kind of teach us, and that's the word conscientization, what politics are. The first time, we heard about ANC and the movements that were by then already for the longest time in exile. And so the learning curve was steep and sometimes excruciating. For example, we were taught, everybody, to have respect for older people. And so there was the principal of our school, this very respected guy, that had to be chased away from where kids were congregating. And it was like, how do you do that to a respected person of the community? So that was 76. And then I started myself and that generation that is today probably also called the 76 generation. I mean, it went way worse in other parts of the country, like, for example, in Soweto and Orlando and so on. Whereas, and then came 1984, 85. 84 or 85, if I remember correctly, I was teaching. That was my first job. I taught at the high school in Belhar, Excelsior Secondary. And it was the year, I started the year after the kids refused to write matric, the year of the super SRCs. And so when I got there, those kids were either promoted or they stayed behind.
Yeah.
And so again, as a young teacher of 20, whatever odd years straight from university, I was in this cauldron of, now what now? And I was an Afrikaans teacher. So, you know, and of course, the years at university was probably the best years. I mean, whatever we went through, if we look back during the time, I was there from 80 to 85. Yes. And those years in terms of political conscientization and learning about, you know, Black consciousness, Black Panther movement in America, all of these authors that we suddenly got exposed to, it was just extraordinary times. Yeah.
No, I can only imagine. Your experience itself was quite phenomenal growing up in that areas and being part of that generation. But even more so, your husband, Peter Jones, actually knew Steve Biko. Do you have any interesting tales to convey about the legendary figure?
Look, I don't have interesting. I'm much younger than them. So, you know, they were big shots and big eyes. By then, Steve passed away already, or was killed, murdered.
Yeah, murdered.
So when I eventually met Peter, I didn't know who he was. You know, that's how politically naive we were. Yeah. And then someone asked me, like, you know that guy? I'm like, no, what do you mean? And then gave me a book where I had to read apparently on the back page. And that is when I started discovering that he was actually one of Steve's closest allies. And for example, the one thing that I can tell you is that when the two of them were in Cape Town for conciliatory talks with the New Unity Movement, the ANC, and all the organizations here. And at that stage, they were banned Steve was banned to the Eastern Cape. Yeah. The name of the town for a moment eludes me now. And they were here to come and speak to the leaders from an Azapo Black consciousness perspective, because they were part of that. And for some reason, on that particular night that they were supposed to see one of the particular leaders, they were not allowed into his house. He didn't come outside to greet them. And anyway, then, according to Peter's story, he said to Steve that, listen, I'm not feeling comfortable about this, because he drove and Steve was the passenger. And they then decided they're going to return to King Williamstown. Mm. And then they were stopped at a roadblock just outside of Grahamstown. And initially the police did not know who they were. Until, you know, they asked him to open the boot where there was a lot of political pamphlets in it. But I mean, it could have been anyone. And it's only when they asked Steve to step outside of the car that they realized who it was. So it wasn't a roadblock specifically for them. Mm. And from there, they were taken to Port Elizabeth. I think it was the Sanlam Center, old building over there, where they were taken to, I can't remember the floor now, you know, and they were kept separately. And in that time, Steve died, because he was then taken from there somewhere else. Peter didn't know that Steve was dead. No one told him anything until Steve was killed. Let's assume 2 weeks later. It was the first time that he found out that Steve was killed. When he was transferred to another prison, and he then heard, when he got into the prison, they asked who's coming inside. He said it's Peter Jones. And then they said, well, I'm so sorry about Steve. And that's the first time that he heard about that. But, you know, according to him, Steve was a fun guy. He loved to party. He loved music. They did a lot of work in the Eastern Cape with self-reliance. That was the big thing of the Black consciousness movement. I don't know if Steve is famous for saying, "Black man, you are on your own." And so they, for example, with Dr. Rampele, held a clinic in the middle of the Lallis in the Eastern Cape called Zanempilo. And Zanempilo, for example, is still in existence. If you go down to the Eastern Cape now, as an exercise of what you can do if you have the political will, if you have the foresight, and if you take the community with you, because there was nothing. So they built a clinic for people, not just for for Dr. Mampela, who could deliver babies there in the middle of nowhere, but also to see to other community issues. All of those things are still there in the Eastern Cape and where Steve lived and so on. So, great legacy that he left behind.
That's a great perspective. I think in terms of history, we were way more taught of his political actions and the activism that he stood for, and not really necessarily as him as a person, which was, a fun-loving, positive person that liked to party. It's important to remember the humanity behind it. I also want to point out something that you mentioned at the start, which was that as an Afrikaans person, the anti-apartheid movement, which was grounded in Afrikaans, being from the Afrikaans-dominated government, it felt actually like, or rather, that's what I want to ask is, did it feel like the people from the colored community that were Afrikaans first language, home language, were neglected actually by the movement? Or do you have experiences to say, like, how did you become involved, and how was that received as Afrikaans speaking?
If you say the movement, then what?
I mean all protest actions against the old government and the Down with Afrikaans movement specifically in that time.
Yeah, look, it's a very complex question that needs a complex answer. So I grew up in this Afrikaans community where there was this definite the train spoor, but it wasn't the railway line that ran through the white and the colored community. There was a sloot. I don't know what a sloot is.
Moat, I suppose.
But like a canal.
Yeah, a canal.
That divided the two. And so the differences were stark because we knew that there was a high school, but we had to go away for a different high school. But the one defining thing about that time is, for example, there were two political parties. I don't know if you remember the tricameral system. So there was.
We taught it. I didn't live in that time. I was born in 1994. But continue.
Yeah. So there was that. So there was the colored component and the Indian component, and black people were never represented in anything because they were banished to the homelands, the Bantustans. So in that time, we were, when I was in primary school, very aware that there were two sides of this politics. There were the Labour Party under Alan Hendrikse, and then there was the Federal Party. I cannot remember who their leaders were. I think it was Alethea Jansen in the end. I can't remember all of those names because the lines were so stark. And it was also run along the lines of church. So for example, we grew up Anglican, but when my father became the principal of the Dutch Reform School, we were, shifted towards that side of the community. So we had to become Dutch Reform people. And I mean, I don't have to remind you of the history of the Dutch Reform Church, but who knew? I was 12, 39 years old, who knew? And so already people were divided by religious or faith lines. So there's the English church, the Anglican church, the Afrikaanse Kerk, the Dutch Reform. So those were the two. And so some of us went to the Dutch Reform School and some of us went to the Anglican school, the English school, when no one spoke English. And because we are all Afrikaans speaking people, we only knew English because we had to recite it from the liturgy. And so then these political parties were you either Labour Party or either Federal Party. And so that's what we grew up with. So Afrikaans was never part of the equation. And it was only, like I said to you, when we came to Cape Town that we could understand what was happening. There were a few, I can count it on my one hand, black families living in Bonneville, where I came from. And there was never a us and a them. It was always, it's always an us. there were no dividing lines. We played together, we whatever together. That's what we knew. So only when I started teaching, I became aware. I heard Kaps only when I came to Cape Town. I don't speak Kaps. It's not something I speak. I'm not, because I didn't grow up like that. I don't have anything against it. People must speak whatever they want. So I heard this language, and constantly, because this is where I am now, and then Afrikaans, down with Afrikaans, I just didn't understand it, and so I started immersing myself into this Afrikaans world. I started writing. I'm not too bad at writing. I started writing for magazines and and those kinds of things. So did I feel that there was something against Afrikaans as spoken by colored people? No. Okay. For me, it is a political thing, where you go up against the system, and Afrikaans was part of that system. It wasn't about the people. People is part of the package, but it was never, oh, you colored Afrikaans speaking people, blah, 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 blah. It was never that. Because if you look at the so-called colored leaders that became part of the UDF and the MDM and ANC and all of these movements, there were a lot of them, and no one was against them, specifically the people in the United Democratic Front. And it was not, and that's the thing with Black consciousness. It is about building Black people up to believe in themselves. It was never anti-white. It was never anti-anything. Because, like Steve said, Black man, you're on your own. You have to do it for yourself. Other people are not going to help you. So I never felt like that. I now more so feel that Afrikaans, because people were starting to, then colored people started speaking English in droves, because they kind of felt like marginalized and so on. But I must also say, colored people bring this upon themselves. It's not like someone persecuted them,
right,
specifically and maliciously. But if you understand the politics of this country, you will understand how closely many colored people was aligned to the National Party and to National Party politics. Right. So when in 1994, when the elections and the National Party did not win, because remember, some of these people then came from the Federal Party, and the people from the Labour Party went mostly into the ANC and other structures. They didn't necessarily join the National Party. Yep. And it wasn't long for the National Party to die, because it had no purpose anymore, didn't matter how many colored people they tried to co-opt, it just did not work, because it was just rotten to the core. Yeah. So that kind of gives the background where colored people started feeling, oh, but we're not good. We were not good enough under apartheid. We were not good enough in the new dispensation. So we kind of feel like we're in the middle of the sandwich. And one has to, if you're a psychologist, and you have to start chipping away at what is responsible for that inferiority complex, you'll come to a closer answer as to why people feel that they are marginalized.
Yeah, that's a fantastic perspective. It's actually contrary to what I would say is common belief among my generation that didn't live through that time, but rather just learn from it. Perhaps it's different in different communities, but it's really, really interesting to know. Back to the part where you said you're really good at writing, you evidently applied this in your life and are now the co-founder of Mikateko Media. Just want to know, like, what's the goal and the mission of Mikateko Media, if you could sum it up in a short sentence?
You've got very complex questions in this time of lockdown and the pandemic. So when we started out, we had lofty ideals of we're going to be the #1 publishing country in South Africa. And we are Black females. I mean, yeah, it made, man. So we started very small boutique agency, and we are mostly female driven. Most of our staff are females led by design. It's just how it happened. And so very quickly, we were 3 initially, founders and directors, and we had a shareholder a minority shareholder, whom we used to work for. And then we go like, we will never get anywhere unless one of these people die. So why don't we just do it for ourselves? And so then we broke away from there. They gave us a little bit of money, very few. I can't even remember, but it's not even 100,000, whatever, which we paid back like within, because we landed our first account very, very quickly, which was Transnet. And from there, you know, we started with Mango magazine for which is the airline magazine for Mango, sorry. What kind of moment I had there. But the magazine is called Juice. And I then became the editor, which I still am, because my client apparently is so in love with me that they don't want to let me go. Then along came SAA, Sabona, which we won. And FastJet, that's a regional airline. So we've got 3 airlines in our stable. So it's a national carrier, a regional carrier, and a local carrier. So sometimes when I'm a little bit braggy and you know, people say, oh, but I've got an audience of, you know, Instagram people. I've got 100,000 followers. I'm like, on a monthly basis, I speak to millions of people. Let's talk about the base. So it's a very weird position to be in. You know, it's not those are not magazines that it's lifestyle. It's not like I can have like a voice, but I do try. And so I physically, I'm now called editor-in-chief, very fancy schmancy, but I still do, you know, I train a lot of people because you have to. When, like Steve said, Black, when you're on your own, you have to train the next generation because you're not going to be there forever and for always. And I am a great believer in you have to pass on the skills that you were privileged to be given by people who came before you. So so where are we now? As you know, magazines are closing left, right, and center. So what do we call ourselves? Are we still a publishing company? Do we call ourselves a media house, a media agency? What do we do? So we have started with, well, you know, publishing is still a thing. So during lockdown, when all of these magazines closed down, it's very sad, you know, because these were the real wizards, the stalwarts of South African society. You look overseas, the same thing, you know. So what now? How do you bring out like madness like me, a magazine in the middle of COVID? Are you crazy? But you know, the world has changed. And South Africans might believe falsely that we are part of a first world IT-driven community. We might be early adopters and first adopters where a lot of things are concerned. But where online is concerned, I don't think so. Our society is so fragmented still in the haves and the have-nots that a very few can afford data like you and I sit on Wi-Fi today and we can have hours-long discussions. Some people don't even know what the gig means. They don't understand what it means. It's just beyond their brains. So how do you communicate to people? How do you get essential information about COVID to the furthest of our communities who live in the lullies in the middle of nowhere, no access? How do you speak to them? It's still via traditional means. Print. Show people how to wash their hands. Show people how to social distance. Many people might have cell phones and have access to data. So how do you communicate to them? If you do communicate to them, then those are not the things that they are interested in necessarily right now. They are interested in the stuff that keeps families together. That's the stuff. Let me find out how you're doing. Let me find out where my loved one must be buried within 3 days if you pass away. Those are the things that keep people, you know, clinging to the breadline. So, and I think it's an exciting time for publications to relook themselves. You know, where the old ones are dead because they served a particular purpose. And that purpose has been redefined by lockdown. So what is it that people would like to know now? And apparently, people my age, the silver surface, we are the new kids on the block. That's very interesting for me. That those youngsters on the magazine covers don't sell anymore. It's us old people.
Yeah. Well, it also fits with the generation.
Where we are.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. So that's where
Yeah,
you
no,
are.
that's
It's
good.
also very much connected to, I think, to generations. Like the magazines and stuff were so incredibly formative to your generation. So that's what stuck there. But also innovating in the way that you did to adjust for the incredible challenges that COVID faced you guys is also probably,
Yeah.
part of the reason
Who
why.
still wants to know
Sorry.
who still wants to know 25 positions for sex? Like, who cares? You know, the stuff that used to sell,
Yeah.
lifestyle
Yeah.
magazines. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even understand. Chocolate will enhance your sex. It's sex, hey, and I can't remember. And chocolates. Those are
Mm,
used to be the three things that would sell magazines. You say
yes.
that same frivolous things to people nowadays, you'll get smacked. Because there are other things that have become important.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I also feel like those type of magazines, the Cosmopolitans and so of the world have also gone into the online sphere and have found their success, in terms of, Instagram followings and so on and so forth. But I want to know exactly what do you credit, your success to in terms of the media house? This is how, what changes? Is it the innovation? Is it the ability to adjust? Is it knowing your market incredibly well? What do you credit your success to? All the things that you've just now mentioned, or is it everything?
It's the last thing. It's the
Okay.
last thing mostly, but it is everything. Big media houses. I mean, look around. What has
Hmm.
happened to them? They
Yeah,
had to
go on.
slice the pie smaller and smaller and smaller, get rid of
Yeah.
the albatrosses around their necks. So the more bespoke you are, the more agile you are. Not the more bespoke, the more boutique you are.
Mm.
So we've never had any ambitions to be bigger than what we are. We've had to do what we are doing, and in the process become catalysts and almost like a pipe through which young talent could be channeled. Because it's one of our pillars is to actually raise the next generation of Black media professionals. And with that, I'm not saying we not we don't have white staff or we're not there for white people.
Mm.
Um, you understand how
Mm. Yeah.
skewed that equation is. They still
Yeah.
go to Stellenbosch University journalism school. They still go, um,
Yep.
whereas some of our kids don't even have. They will come as interns, and then we train them, and then once they're fully trained, white companies take them away. I get so mad, but
Yeah.
I shouldn't because that's the job that we are in. That's what we are supposed to do. So it's a combination of those things. To never get greedy,
Mm.
never ever get greedy. Do what you can and do it to the best of your ability. You do not have to change the entire world. Just look in front of you. Maybe that's the patch that you can, toil
Mm.
and make a difference from where you are. I am a huge believer in local, from clothing to buying furniture that's made by local people and so on. So yeah, man, do it. Yeah. Why do we always look the rest of the world to show us what we do? You ask the Americans about, for example, what we do with cell phone banking. Those people don't even know what we're talking about.
Oh.
That's how ahead we are in this IT game.
Mm.
In terms of early adoption and so on. But again, I'm not sure if I finished the point that we're not America, we are not Britain, we are
Mm.
not people who consume media like that. We are a developing country, and we need to remind ourselves about that all of the time.
Mm.
Because if we do not understand that we are still a developing country, we will behave like we are a superpower, um, and then we will leave the most vulnerable behind.
Mm.
Will be the 1% who will be fine, but the rest
Mm.
will not be. You know how
Mm.
revolution happens with
Mm.
one.
Yes.
1%
Yeah.
means nothing. The bottom will
99%.
push you out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we had a fantastic discussion a few podcasts ago with the vice chancellor of UCT of Transformation, and one of the questions we asked there was, do you think that printed or in person or class, education will continue, or will this all just become digital and so on? And she made exactly the point as you did now, where she said that we had this perception that South Africa is this interconnected, high quality world standard internet society, but they still had to send out laptops to students that didn't have laptops. They do it as a standard, but I mean, and they had to provide data for people that didn't. And even if they go back to those communities, there might be communities of students that live in the same room with the entire family, and then that's impractical to learn in. So it's all this environments is actually still, we're part from all the way from the one side to the other side, but we have this idea on the internet that yes, we're up there. So it's interesting balancing that. I think
Absolutely.
as so many opportunities. What do your advice
Yeah.
be for anybody that starts their own company? to be able to, is it important to be able to identify a market and that's going to be where you lead your success in? Or is it the people that you hire? For example, you said you're a majority Black woman business organization, that help you as well, that help you be more representative in executive positions or not? How exactly what advice would you give?
Let me first answer this. If you're not diverse in the newsroom, if you're not diverse in the boardroom, if you're not diverse in the corporate environment, you're never going to win. You're not going to win. 1994 made sure that at least that bit of history is dead. So it's a combination of the things that you were talking about. How do you start your own thing? There are so many opportunities in South Africa, so many opportunities. But we are also a nation we like to be spoon-fed. We like to say, oh, but the government must do this. We are such bad children. So when the president calls a family meeting, we go into jitters because we do not even know what we did wrong, but we know. So we love that idea that the government, because that's what the ANC and the liberation movement said, the people shall govern, right? Does the people govern? No, the people are not governing. Individual, a few people are governing. So how do you identify that need? And that's the crux right there. I think people must look at themselves, right? Yeah. If you know that there is I'm going to a simple example. I live here in Pringle Bay. There's no Woolies, there's no clothing stores, there's no nothing. So what's the opportunity right here? Is to have a Woolies like Delhi, right? To satisfy the need of the rich and shameless, of which I am no part. So that's a need, right? That needs to be satisfied. You will be successful. You're not going to become as strong as Woolies. It doesn't matter. You're surviving in a small community. So what are the needs? COVID, so many opportunities. Most of them ended in corruption with, the masks and tenders that went to friends and family. But what are the other things that happen? Yeah, so if you must look around you and identify the needs around you, what would you want to have solved for yourself that's not out there? For example, I can now call a shop in town and they will deliver ice cream before it melts to my house. Someone saw the need in the middle of summer and decided, well, that's what I'm going to do. So it's not the big things. People think that it's the big things. It's not. It's the small things. Like look at Facebook, a couple of friends who liked each other on a network and now they are dominating the world. You know what I mean? So it's not always the big things. It's the small things. Identify them and then surround yourself with some people who think like you, but the majority of the people should not think like you. Otherwise, you will never be pushed into any direction to be better and higher and all of those things. So don't just surround yourself with sayers, ja broers. No, kick them to the curb. Find the people who make you so angry that you do not want to go back to work the next day. Those are the people who will make you become better as a company and as a person.
That's awesome. I feel like that's such a cool message. It's such a, it's not only step out of your comfort zone, but bring your uncomfort zone to you so that you form better as a person. I love that sentiment as well. It's really, really cool. You had to solve something. Sorry?
Don't make the circle bigger. Don't make the circle bigger. Smash the circle.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, actually. That's very important. I just want to talk about some of the challenges you had to face. If you still had to deliver printed media to the people that didn't have access before, and you know that there's such a market for it now because these people don't have the data, they don't have the necessary devices to be able to watch things digitally in a time where we can't move. How exactly do you go about solving that problem to get the physical stuff to people in a time of lockdown, getting the information spread to them? Is it regulatory and then you need to get the drivers, or do you build that up all out of yourself?
You know what? If someone listens to you now, there lies the next opportunity for an entrepreneur. How do you get from point A to point B? Because many of those companies have folded. because they are also traditionally, oh, we must take this magazine to X amount of stores, and they might not want it because they don't want people to touch it, blah, 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 blah. So what did we do? We decided to make our office a takeaway zone, right?
Okay.
So you order your magazine, you pay, you come and collect, you drive by the gate, someone will hand it to you, right? There you go. You can decide on the date that you wanted, the hour that you wanted. There will be someone to deliver your magazine for you. We then took our staff and we said, listen, we know everyone needs money. So if you take your car and you drive to some of these areas, we will put petrol in your car. We will pay you for the hours that whatever. Go and drop these magazines at people's houses. So, but that's not a sustainable solution. So we have tasked our youngsters to come up with a new distribution model, because people do not want this magazine, for example, in digital format. They want a physical copy in their hands because it's by the people. I'm not writing anything in it. The people are writing it. And that is the thing, when you involve the people, they will carry you on their shoulders. They want this like a piece of history. I'm not talking about this magazine specifically and the book. So the publisher drives to your house to come and deliver the book if you can't go and collect it. But like I said, it's not sustainable. And that is what we need to think of. How do we get these things to people? We had an Auntie Ivy. Oh, I love it dearly. Like those old aunties with the nails just like filed like in a triangle and so on. It's like old school. And so we said to her, she needs to make an online payment. And she was like, no, she doesn't know how to do that. So we said, so what can we do? And she says, no, she's going to go to the post office. She's going to fill in a postal order. And then I like, what? Does that still even exist? Anyway, but do you understand the digital divide? That they don't know. So anyway, we sent someone to her home to show her what she must do, and over the magazine. And today she's more savvy than we are. That's like 8 months later. So it just needs someone to show them what it is that they must do.
Yeah. That's actually a great business opportunity as well. I feel like there's, some people they just absolutely were forced into the learning curve and able to just simply, do the basic things like connect with the people that you were able to talk about on a daily basis. If they can't be there in person, you don't really have much other of the choice other than the telephone or digital. And the phone is so incredibly expensive. So there's a business opportunity there and able to, to create an educational medium that these people can understand, perhaps in magazine format, actually, which is something they're familiar with, to teach them how to do things digitally, which empowers them. And I'm pretty sure most people are willing to learn, given the opportunity and given the patience that they deserve. Yeah. I mean, the Tanya is just a perfect example of. I wanted to ask a question out of pure curiosity, right? So I've been privileged enough to fly long distance, and the magazine that sits in front of you, I don't know how many people read that, and also don't know why they read that. So how do you go about designing that magazine? I don't understand. Like sometimes you open it and it's just a lot of ads for things you can buy that's very overpriced on the plane. And then on the other hand, it's some interesting article, but it's 4 months old. How do you go about designing the magazine that goes in an airplane to actually catch people's attention?
An article is 4 months old. What do you mean?
No, some of the international flights I've been on, the magazine that they put in there, they don't do a lot of effort to put in new, interesting articles. They put the old magazine in there, and by the time you read it, it's the same one you read on the flight back, for example.
It's so sad. Luckily, I don't work for those airlines.
No.
Listen, when you design a magazine, any magazine, right? This is our pre-lockdown. People spend at most 25 minutes with a magazine.
Okay.
So then you have to decide. So in that 25 minutes, what are you going to do? So a magazine is designed. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in the beginning of the magazine will be the shorter, snippety pieces.
Okay.
It's like when you come onto the plane, you're just settling in, you're reading a little bit of the short stuff. And so now we are mid-air, we are beyond 30,000 feet in the air. So now we're in the middle of the magazine. It's called the well, right? Like a dam, where the best stuff is packed in, right? The meaty articles, the most expensive ads. So while you are sitting down in that 25 minutes, you might not read one or two or three of those longer articles. And then you go to the back of the magazine, right? Where, again, we're now ready for coming into the airport. So now you're going to read shorter, snippety stuff. We work with contributors from around the world. So we will never have an article that is 4 months old or whatever. So our contributors come from everywhere. We try and make it fresh. We will never have the same content online that we will have in the magazine. There will be differences.
Like exclusivity.
So how do we keep people busy? We only have a window period of 25 minutes. That's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I fully understand what you are saying and appreciate that. So maybe on the trip back, you can read the other one in your 25 minutes and not the same article.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I think that's so important.
I want to tell you this little story. You know, the South Africans do not want to take magazines off the plane. It can say there, free copy, you are allowed to take it off the plane. We have to beg people to take it off the plane because they think they're stealing. Like, no, you're not stealing. You are allowed to take magazines off the plane. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. That's actually very important. Sorry, interesting. I never thought that you're allowed to actually take the magazine off the plane. I thought it was, there for everybody to have.
Say so. Free copy. Take it.
I think that's a perception that needs to change.
Because they need to replenish.
Yeah. Well, I think you should do more airplane magazines than just 3 carriers, because you'll actually fill them with interesting content that I'd like to read. The other ones are incredibly boring. So no, thank you so much. That's very cool. That's very interesting. So you also mentioned that you try to give good articles written by the people, and that's why they're invested in it. And if you wrote an article in any type of book or a magazine or newspaper, so you want to have the physical article and then save it in your house because you wrote that and your family will treasure that for a long time. That's part of like your pride and your history. But there is a feeling that people have towards media at the moment that the standards of journalism has slipped, and then they don't respect it anymore. It's like the same amount of effort that maybe goes into magazines like you guys do, don't go into other magazines. They just write the pieces to get it out, to just fill it, just have those filler things that people can consume en masse. What do you feel about that? Do you think it's true? Do you think it's a minority and it just gets a lot of attention? What do you think about the state of journalism?
What a broad question. Look, I'm in the lifestyle section of magazines, so it's easier, to kind of guess what it is that people want. And so that is easier. I am on record as hating bloggers. I hate them with a passion because these are the people who have started to give us these bad names because they're there for the freebies. They're there for the what can I get out of it. They're not writers. So then they offer these articles to us. I refuse. I don't want it unless I know how good you are. I'm sorry. I don't care that you got a freebie or went on the strip to wherever. I don't care. I'm not rewriting your article for you and then I must still pay you. So it's not happening. But that being said.
So when you move from lifestyle magazines, for example, where it's relatively easier, but you also have to be very aware. I call it what we do experiential traveling. So if you haven't gone to Thailand, but I'm not going to accept your article because we do not do press release journalism, where a PR company sends you an article and wants you to, and then they might pay you a rand or not. No. So when you move to hardcore news, I think they are struggling with fake news. And how do people distinguish between real news and fake news? And it is with the onset of anybody with a cell phone is a journalist nowadays, whether it's lifestyle or whether it's hard news. If something happens in front of you, you take a video and you post it online immediately. So many media houses are starting taking these videos and news that they glean from the internet and they use it as leads. Whereas in the past, you had to go and find the story, you had to go find the lead, you had to go and do that. So they are responsible for their own demise in a huge way. And that is how fake news entered the fray, right? Donald Trump could push anything that he wanted into that, because by then, when you keep on saying that's fake, that's fake, that's fake, that's fake, how do people distinguish in the end what's fake and what's real? And you have Fox News, and then you have CNN. Oh my word, CNN during the Trump. Really, people? Okay. And then in South Africa, you have ENCA, who's constantly being told, but you are biased, you're against the government. Then you have the SABC, who are sycophants of the government. And so it becomes very, very difficult. And then you, of course, have on a Sunday, you've got Twitter, and you have Black Twitter, who will tell you that all of this is just all fake, and these are the real news, and blah, blah, blah. So there are still really good journalists out there. Adrian Basson of Network 24 is an outstanding young man, who tries his darndest to get away from the old Die Burger, Naspers legacy that he's not responsible for in a direct way. So he's trying very hard to drive a new newsroom of inclusivity and diversity and so on. That's the only way. So when someone says, well, but Pieter Mulder is die seun wat die Here gestuur het om die Noord-Kaap te kom red, then someone else from the Eastern Cape must say, what? Absolute hogwash, because A, B, C, D, and E, I'm talking about in your newsroom, again, coming back to that thing, your balance of the people who are on your side, and then the other people who will oppose you all of the time. That's the only way that we will get rid of it. So did journalism take a knock? Yeah, it did. But there are still good guys out there, and there are still people who really, really, really want to do, and they will just have to work harder and forget about, celebrity gossip and poor Malusi Gigaba and his wife on the cover of the next newspaper will sell the newspaper. People are sick of it, They actually want to see what is going right in this country. And that's the stuff that we need to concentrate on, and not this other BS that we have to that's dished up. Because the assumption is that is what people want. That's the assumption. It's not based in fact. You did not ask people if it's okay with them if you give them this rubbish all of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you'd think initially bad news sold. Right. Definitely it gained more traction than just news as in a dilution of all possible things to report on. And I think, or rather, do you think that being flooded by negative news has made people realize that this is not a good thing, it's not a positive thing, and now they're looking for positive news again? Or do you think they always wanted positive news and it was just this period of bad news sells, that's why it's flooding the market? What do you think behind the movement?
A little bit of a Sisyphus there.
Okay.
Push the stone up the mountain and it will roll back on. So you're absolutely right in saying that there was a time when people wanted all of this insider knowledge about things and people, and oh my God, look how bad they are. We are not that bad. They are equally bad. And then, can't credit Trump for a lot of things, but we have to credit him for this. That people are so sick of this. I don't want to swear on your show, but
we can do whatever you want.
People are heartily sick of being thrown to the wolves like this by a bully. By people who bully you constantly online. The same in South Africa. We have the same. We listen to the Zondo Commission and you go like, how are people this rotten? These were the people that we wanted to take as the people's government. What happened to the people's government? Are we just, perpetuating what the apartheid people taught them, that this is how bad and how rotten you can be. And all around the world, there's this backlash against corruption. There's this backlash against the bad of the world. And yes, the world is ready for good news. Is it sustainable? Ask Sisyphus. Once you're up there. So things are cyclical. It's never like, oh my God, this is now the new nirvana. It will last until, you have to take the next Zol to see where the next high will come from. It's unfortunately a cycle that we have to ride and see where it takes us.
That's really cool. I feel like it's so important to point out that there's always, I always call it a sinusgolf, it's always like we go up and then we look at a lot of positive things and then people get tired of the positive things because it's not sustainable. And then you go down the hole again. It's like, I hope that someday the sinusgolf will like just flatten out a bit, just peter into something that's reasonable.
It will be the end of the world. It will be the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just human nature for it to continuously go up and down. So yeah, there's a ton of factors. There's a million factors that contribute to people's different feelings about it. I know, for example, just an example of what you said now about good news winning. I think there's a newspaper called The Good News. I think it's actually The Good News in Hermanus. And it's mostly local news. You know that newspaper?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's awesome to read. It's so great. It's like showing all the the tournaments, like the small sporting events that won, or other positive things that people like to see. And people still like to see it because if you look at the videos that go viral online for people like me that are very involved online, those are also generally very wholesome things. And the negative things obviously push through, but the things that kind of gain steady access or steady attention is wholesome things as well. So there's a balance there, and it's different communities as well. It's interesting to notice, and it's just great to know that print media is hopefully, in your case at least, noticing that, and you're writing about things that people actually want to hear about, not just negative things that might sell or so. Do you think perhaps that, because it's a bit of a different discussion, but do you think perhaps that the drive towards ad revenue and the profitability therein could have pushed people to do lower quality journalism, both in lifestyle and in hardline journalism as well? Because if something gets too lucrative, then people will jump in that are not passionate about it and don't want to do the right thing. They just want to make a quick buck.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. It's also a sentiment I feel like a lot of people, are realizing now.
Yeah, agreed. And the amounts of money that was paid, the amounts of trades that were made, it is not sustainable. Someone must still buy that magazine.
Yeah.
And you can't force people to fork out X amount of money if they do not believe in your product. It doesn't matter the pretty pictures that you put in there. It doesn't matter the amount of stuff that you have done. They're not interested. They are really not interested. And so articles that used to be 3,000 words long are now 700 words long because apparently we don't read anymore. Until the New York Times brought back the long read again. And so now we are long reading again, that curve. So I sincerely hope that we've seen the backside of some of these greedy publishers. Well, they're dying a slow and painful death. Not all of them were greedy, but times have changed and people have changed. And if you don't change and evolve with the times, I mean, you're going to die a slow and painful death.
People also appreciate things that they pay for as well. It's like, I think there's a saying, I'm not quite exactly sure if this is right, but I think there's a saying that goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch, which is just that if you ever get something for free, like you get a magazine for free, you're paying for it in some other way. And usually in our case, that's advertisements or something, right? But if you pay for something, you're also going to look after it. So if you have to pay a smaller fee because there are still ads in the magazine, but it's a small fee, then you're going to appreciate that magazine for because you had to fork out something for it. So there's also important sentiment in the value of actually having to pay for something. It's just making it a reasonable price so that it's still accessible to the people that wouldn't be able to buy it otherwise. It's a balance.
Absolutely right.
But it's been incredibly insightful to chat to you. I've really, really enjoyed it. Is there anything else you'd like to add, lastly?
Lastly, I've gotten involved in involved in a talk show called Tussen Ons, Between Us, with 4 other women. And so that's my new, normal, whatever that means. Because you can hear I love talking. And I don't want to just talk gibberish. I want to have real conversations, and I used to call it over and above the show. I used to do stuff on my Facebook. I would interview a lot of people, the people that I want to interview, that I find interesting, and I can ask them interesting questions. And so I posted them on social media, and I did it for a radio station don't have enough work to do, for a radio station in Paarl. whose name I now also eludes me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best 30 minutes I used to spend with these people. And I would send it to the radio station, and then they will post it on their social media stuff. And then people go like, but you need to do your own show. I'm like, I don't think, no. So during my, by doing that, I also started engaging a coach, something I was totally against, but now I am so pro coach. And through that process, I started hearing myself saying a lot of things, and I wrote them down. And so now, and then I did a workshop with coastal women, and I called it Circular Conversations. Like, what is Circular Conversations? What is going to be in the handouts, and what's the the course notes? I said, I've got nothing. They're like, what do you mean you've got nothing? I said, I've got nothing. Those women don't know me. I don't know them. They might have seen me on television, and they might have a perception of me. So how can I go with my brood onder my arm to women who do not even have bread for their children for tomorrow? So these were coastal women, for example, whose husbands depend on fishing. So if the boats can't go out, then what do? So these small town communities are not empowered, the women, to look after themselves and fend for themselves. They're always dependent on some male to look after them. And if he doesn't provide them, there's literally nothing in the house. And so I met with these 25 women on a 3-day workshop. And they were waiting for notes. I'm like, there's no notes. We're going to make the notes right here. You're going to talk to me about yourselves. We're going to come up with the business solutions right here. And by the end of day 3, you can ask me again, where's the course notes? It was the best 3 days of my 2021, I must tell you. Those women left there, and then I changed what I do from self-doubt to self-sustainability. That is so self-reliance. And so that's what I want to do with my life and time in 2021. I really would like to go. I'm a Plattelands amazing. I would like to go to those communities where people are so hopeless. And just, this whole thing, look in front of you. There might be something here that you do. So, for example, they had jams that they made. I'm like, who made these jams? Old auntie puts her hand up. I said, why is your name not on this jam? You know why I will buy this jam? If Auntie Rini, if your name is there, Auntie Rini made this jam, I'll buy it. I'm going to buy cool jam or whatever jam. Because it is about the support of local. And who can make jam better with sirfaya than an auntie who lives at the seaside? Only you. No factory can do this. So, our next process will be about labeling and selling and going to market and so on. So that excites me. You have no idea. It excites me.
That sounds awesome as well. I'd love to buy things that were, locally made, personalized. And it's also just of a higher quality. And it's interesting because if that person makes it and they don't enjoy it, they're not going to sell it. But if they enjoy it, then you're probably going to enjoy it as well. Whereas Cool doesn't give a damn. They've got their recipe and that's going out. So, But anyways, this has been a fantastic conversation. I just want to thank you so much for talking to you. And to our viewers, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you've made it thus far, you most definitely like the content. It helps out the channel a ton if you could like the video and share it among your friends and family. Also, if you consider, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you consider donating on Patreon, this is something that it's a platform that financially supports our channel, allows us to talk to more people, get better equipment, do better interviews. So that would also help us out a lot. Just please remember, we have a wonderful rendition by the Libertas Choir right here after in the video, and you must enjoy it as well. Thank you so much. This has been WorldView.